Welcome to Criminal Appeal, the true crime podcast with expert perspective. I'm your host, Dr. Casey Jordan. As a criminologist, I've investigated mass murderers and human traffickers, assassins and stalkers, serial and spree killers, wife beaters, and wives with knives. I've analyzed crimes and court cases for commentators like Anderson Cooper, Ashley Banfield, Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, Nancy Grace, and Piers Morgan. Now, I'm revealing my insider's perspective on criminal cases that I've worked, just for you. This episode may contain sensitive material, including interviews with individuals involved in crimes, depictions of violence, and explicit language. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to Criminal Appeal, the true crime podcast where we discuss cases that I have actually worked firsthand as a criminologist, defense attorney, investigative profiler, victim advocate, or even media consultant. I am your host, Dr. Casey Jordan, and I am joined by my lovely co-host,
Dr. Colleen Butler-Sweet.
And we have a case tonight that you would have to be living under a rock not to have heard of. About 3 weeks ago, there were, actually mid-December of 2025, there were pretrial hearings that concluded in New York that were evidentiary hearings in the case of Luigi Mangione. He is the 27-year-old who was arrested about a year ago for the murder of the CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson. He's facing multiple federal and state charges, including weapons possession and forgery, but the most important, of course, is murder. We anticipate the decision on those evidentiary hearings to come out in May of 2026, just a few months away. And we will be following this case very closely on Criminal Appeal in the coming year, especially if it goes to trial. Now, we know, of course, that this is a case that is not without controversy. You need to know that my involvement in this case is a little bit tangential. I covered this case in real time as it was happening for the media. As a former contributor for CNN, I was receiving calls with the new evidence daily since the footage was released of a masked figure firing into the back of Brian Thompson. Now, this culminated about a year ago in January of 2025, when after he was captured, I got a call from my friends and producers, Rhonda Schwartz and Brian Ross, who were producing very quickly a fabulous documentary called Who is Luigi Mangione, which you may have seen on HBO or Investigation Discovery, and I highly recommend that you see that. But the title, Who is Luigi Mangione, is the burning question we attempted to answer in that documentary that came out a year ago, but we are still asking ourselves that question. And that is what we're going to try to unpeel tonight, to go over what we know about the man accused in the shooting of Brian Thompson and what it means to our culture and to what we know will happen to him through the criminal justice system. Now, to kick things off, let's watch the trailer from Who is Luigi Mangione that you, again, can watch on HBO or catch on Investigation Discovery.
CEO of United Healthcare, shot and killed.
The story exploded.
I was in disbelief.
I heard the name on the news.
Police arrested Luigi Mangione.
You could see that it was not a professional hit.
Who is this guy?
They are the epitome of the American dream. He was brilliant.
We're all so proud of him.
The doctors won't have a clue what's going on.
He had a lot of health issues.
Maladies and pain.
It was completely devastating.
He started reading the writings of the Unabomber.
Being mayor, the radicalization strikes terror and anxiety.
Luigi reached out to me via email. He seemed to have just sort of gone dark.
Right after it happened, my phone was just non-stop. He didn't seem like the kind of guy that would do something like that.
A take I found online that I think is interesting. Violence against those who lead us to destruction is justified as self-defense.
Brian Thompson.
He was very talented, very bright individual.
The CEO is not the person who looks at individual claims.
But people wanted somebody to scapegoat.
He allegedly has an enemy in his crosshairs, and it is the insurance industry.
It seems the path of these two former valedictorians were about to cross.
People are donating. They are holding signs up outside. Young women are writing him letters and throwing him kisses. And he thinks, perhaps not incorrectly, that the American public will agree with him.
How do you plead this indictment, sir? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
As soon as he was arrested, Luigi Mangione became a hero to many.
Young women are writing him letters and throwing him kisses.
Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Of course, the question now becomes, who is Luigi Mangione?
Who is Luigi Mangione? You know, we're going to try to answer that question, or at least shed light on the question. But to do that, let's have an overview of the entire case, and no one better to kick that off than my co-host Colleen.
And what an eventful morning it was that December of 2024. So at roughly 6:45 a.m. on the morning of December 4th, 2024, Brian Thompson, the CEO of the insurance arm of United Healthcare, was making his way to the New York Hilton in Midtown, just across the street from the hotel, a Marriott, a boutique Marriott he was staying at. And he was heading to the Hilton to prepare for the insurance company's investors meeting that was taking place that morning. As Thompson walked along West 54th Street towards the hotel's north entrance, a gunman approaches him from behind, fired 3 shots, hitting Mr. Thompson in the back and in the right calf. At 6:48, just 3 minutes later, officers arrive at the scene and find Thompson with multiple gunshot wounds. He's taken to the nearby Mount Sinai Hospital, where at 7:12, this all happened so fast, at 7:12, the 50-year-old insurance executive is declared dead.
And I know this area of Midtown very well. I have a place at 56th and Park, and I know that hotel. And I always was struck by the fact that he left his hotel to go across to the meeting without even his winter coat, because that's how short the walk was. It was literally across the street. But he was only 50 years old. He is married and has 2 teenage sons. He was well known for being really devoted to his children. He might be the CEO of a company, but he was very involved in their sports, and he spent a ton of time with them. He was well liked in his community. And one of his friends literally said, Brian is one of the good guys. He was certainly one of the smartest guys, and I think he was one of the best guys. I'm going to miss him, says his friend, and I'm really proud to call him my friend. So, you know, controversy aside about what he did for a living, he was well loved by his family, a good dad, and he had a lot of friends.
And that's important, because controversy is the right word. As controversial as this case is, as controversial, frankly, as the United States insurance industry is, he was still a person. He was a husband. He was a father. He was a son. He was a brother. And it's important for us always on criminal appeal that we humanize our victims and we center the victims. And that's not going to be different in this case. We can be critical of the insurance industry, but still center the victim in this case.
Yeah.
So back to the timeline. This is all happening during the morning commute in Midtown Manhattan. There are surveillance cameras everywhere, right, in that part of the city. And within hours of the incident, CNN was actually the first to eventually release some of the truly most chilling CCTV footage I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, it almost looks like a scene from a movie.
Yes.
I mean, well, let's talk about that footage, which I think almost everyone has seen. And first of all, it is dark outside. It may be 7 o'clock in the morning, but it's December in the Northeast, which means it's still dark outside in the morning.
Yep.
It's nighttime. And this is a time when a lot of people in New York City are headed to work. A lot of people get to work early just to avoid the traffic and the commuter jams. So what we see in that surveillance footage is, of course, a person dressed all in black in a hoodie with his hood up, black pants, black sneakers, a dark figure. And the gray backpack, actually, that would be really important evidence later because it was distinctive. Everyone figured out what kind of backpack it was by searching for it online. But we see this figure with the backpack in the dark clothing emerge from the corner of the video. This person raises their gun, approaches Mr. Thompson from behind. And we can tell that this gun is fitted with a silencer, and he's within feet of his victim when he points and shoots that gun. Now, we know from the New York City police chief that the video goes on to show what he calls methodical firing of what appears to be a single action handgun at the CEO, Brian Thompson. And what they noted is that he pulled back the slide with each shot. And in fact, he fired the gun 3 times and hit him in the back and his calf. And at one point, it appeared that the gun malfunctioned and he had to clear the jam and begin again firing. So that seemed to suggest that this was somebody who was very practiced with a handgun. Now, in total, 3 bullet casings were recovered from that scene, along with 3 ejected live rounds. So I think his intention was 6 bullets, but 3 of them struck his victim and the other 3 were ejected. The question is, did he do that on purpose? Because as we're going to find out, there was writing on those bullet cases. Now, then the video shows him, the culprit, fleeing into an alley where a phone that is believed to belong to the suspect was later recovered in that alley.
All right, Casey, so we all saw this video footage. I do remember that morning. I think I saw it on the Today Show as I was getting the kids ready for school, and I gasped when I saw it because it really was sort of this chilling assassination-style video. Now, we've covered or are covering another case this season on Criminal Appeal about the MIT Brown shooting.
Right.
And we've talked about how even when a face is not clear in CCTV footage, there are other cues that you can pick up on. In that shooting at Brown MIT, you could tell this person was older just by their gait. Yeah. Now, what I'm interested in is when I first saw that footage, I immediately am like, oh, that's a young guy. That's maybe a college student, early 20s at the most. And for me, the cues, it was the hoodie, it was the backpack, it was the sneakers, it was the way that he carried himself. I immediately am like, ooh, this is not an older man. This is a young guy. What was popping for you when you saw that
Well,
video?
I came to the same conclusion. He looked relatively tall and lithe, if you will. Athletic. He moved with confidence and elegance. And that really seemed to be the action of an athlete or somebody very young. And also the way he ran off. I mean, he just was out of there. You know, when this happened, though, we didn't know much. We just knew this man had been shot. And the criminologist in me, lacking any kind of evidence, is going to tell you that statistically, this might be something, this is what we usually see, that is a disgruntled employee of United Healthcare, somebody who had been fired. That is the most likely scenario. If it's not workplace related, I would say it might be familial related. Is somebody, and we know this is not the case, please, this is just a hypothetical, is somebody having an affair with Brian's wife and decides to dispatch the husband so he can be with the wife? Or, you know, it's a love triangle of some sort. Statistically, that's very highly likely as well in something like this. So, you know, it was a random murder, but let's take a listen to my thoughts in real time in December from 2024 on CNN as I discuss some of the options at a time when, again, I want to remind everybody, I had no idea who the shooter was, and I'm just kind of like giving my opinion on the fly.
Casey, police also say the video provides clues that the shooter could be an experienced marksman. How might that help investigators identify him?
Well, the level of expertise that you see him in handling that very specific gun and ejecting those bullets, again, if that was intentional to make sure the bullets that were marked with those words flew out so he knew they would be found. I mean, it really does show that he has a lot of experience, if not expertise, with firearms. That could suggest that he has experience in the military, but or even in law enforcement, but far more likely what we call a pseudo commando, a kind of wannabe, somebody who has consumed a lot of video games with high action and a lot of, shoot 'em up, and took that into practice. He has definitely been on a shooting range and practiced what he did over and over again because he was very calm through the entire shooting process. But then again, even as Andrew so beautifully outlined all of his planning, he still dropped the phone, he still dropped the water bottle. So even the best laid plans, they're going to screw up. And the mistakes he makes are surely what are going to get him caught, I think, relatively soon.
So interesting.
Right. But after that, he left the scene on a bike. I mean, you don't really, but trust me.
An e-bike.
An e-bike, which probably was helpful, which, by the way, they've never recovered. But he literally had an e-bike waiting for him in the alley, which I have to tell you is pure genius in Manhattan. You faster than a car, faster than a subway. And he goes north up into Manhattan to just a few blocks before he enters Central Park. He goes through Central Park on the e-bag, and at some point, though, he stopped, and this had to be pre-planned, and dumped the backpack because they eventually found it hidden in some boulders in Central Park. Continues over to the Upper West Side, takes a taxi up to a Port Authority bus terminal, eventually gets on a train from the Port Authority to Pennsylvania. And then for the next few days, apparently he's crisscrossing between, everywhere between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And over the next few days, the police realized, in spite of all these images, they are going to need the public's help. And they released still footage of the suspect and his interaction. This is going to be one of the most helpful in a youth hostel that was on the Upper West Side. And this, I loved this. We see his full face for the first time. Before that, it was just eyes and a mask.
No, definitely. And I'm thinking, yes, he's on the e-bike. Another thing that is signaling to me young, like, a 20-something would think of the e-bike and Port Authority. And then I actually think he ended up making his way to Penn Station, which I've always been curious what that was about. He's at Port Authority, then he goes his way to Penn Station. But I agree, those still shots from the hostel, not only are they great in that they were full face, but I would argue we start to see some of the interest in Luigi, not just as a suspect, but as honestly a sex symbol.
Yeah.
Then, because it was a full smile, very handsome face in that still shot. And that's when I first saw the percolating of
he likes adoration, because let me tell you how we have that full face shot. He wore the mask always. But when he was checking into the hostel, a girl who was working the desk there was flirty with him. And she was checking him in. He stayed there, we believe, and said, something like, "You're such a handsome guy. Let me see your gorgeous face." And he took the compliment and pulled that mask down, loved the attention. And that is how we have that full face shot. That was not voluntary. That was provoked by a girl who was flirting with him. So let's see another clip. This comes directly from the HBO documentary, Who is Luigi Mangione?
We had gotten to a point where we felt that we needed the public's help. And that's why we released, the photograph and the video. We have him from the shooting scene, fleeing back uptown.
We had him in a taxi cab. We also had a clear vision of his face at the hostel where he was staying. Those two clear photos of his face were what alerted the customers and employees at that McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. The minute that they saw him in the corner eating his hash browns, they called police.
Solved by McDonald's employees. Quite seriously.
And those photos being just all over. There was a moment too, and I think it's worth noting, having no idea that he was involved, his mother played a little bit of role in here in that she reports him as missing from San Francisco, not knowing what's going on. Detectives talk to his mother because images of the suspect and images of Mangione that his mother provided seem to be matching a little bit. But just as you said, right, he's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. He's sort of crisscrossing Pennsylvania at this point. He's in Altoona. And somebody, just a customer, tells an employee, "Hey, that looks like the guy." And wouldn't you know it is. And in his bag, when he's apprehended, they do find a 3D printed gun, 3D printed suppressor, which the police said was consistent with the weapon that was used, and the falsified New Jersey license that police say he used to check into the hostel. So there's quite a lot of really persuasive evidence there that he is one and the same with this person on the video. So they've got the guy. What are your thoughts on the police work? This is December 9th, so it's relatively fast.
Oh, it was fast, but it was the public. Okay, two things solve this. The police did a phenomenal job. Oh, and by the way, all the stuff found in the backpack at the McDonald's, this is what they are trying to suppress. just so you know. The gun, the silencer, and the notebook, which has a manifesto in it, which we'll talk about later. But I think police did a phenomenal job, and guess why? Number one, they trusted the public, and they got it out there. Sometimes police are like, oh, no, we don't need our tip line flooded with 10,000 false leads, because that's a reality. Once you ask for the public's help, you better have a huge room full of people to field those phone calls. And it is a mountain, and 99.99999% of them are going to go nowhere. And it's like a needle in the haystack, but they trusted it. Okay, police did a great job. They trusted the public. But here's what I want to point out. That video surveillance, all these still shots that we have came from cameras. Cameras really solved this. If we were just depending on cab drivers and hostel workers to call in and say, I think I might have seen the guy, I don't think we would have gotten him. And I really want to give a shout out, because they are not commissioned police officers sitting there getting this footage in most cases. They are highly trained civilian workers within the criminal justice system. Professionals, IT experts. They had thousands of hours of video surveillance to cull through. And you have to sit there with the mouse and say, okay, does this one look like him? It is thankless work, and it is the work of better angels. And I'm telling you that those people really need a big shout out, because they got the images to the police, got them on the media, and then people started seeing him. The cab driver remembered and remembered where he dropped him off. The hostel worker remembered, and the people in McDonald's were like, look at the guy with the hash browns. So without those images, I really don't think that he would have been caught when he was. And who knows if he had another target in mind. We got him very quickly.
It also reminds me a little bit when you say inviting the public, really needing their help. It reminds me of the Boston bombers, too. It was the same sort of thing there, that they were really struggling. And as soon as they put those images out, once again, even though they were blurry, you could tell, all right, these are two young guys, their gait and everything like that.
Yeah.
And quickly thereafter, they actually were able to find him. And listen, upon his capture, the New York Police Commissioner, Jessica Chitch, told reporters, this is a premeditated, pre-planned, targeted attack. The suspect waited behind a parked car until Thompson passed and opened fire. He then ran through an alley, hopped on a bike, rode through Central Park. Shortly thereafter, investigators also shared that 3 cartridge casings left behind at the scene of Thompson's murder were inscribed with the words delay, deny, depose. Now, Casey, what do those words mean?
Delay, deny, depose is like a dark joke in the insurance industry, almost a poster that would go across in front of everybody's desk when they're asked to review a claim. And this is how you make money in the insurance industry. You delay until people just give up. Well, you know what, Colleen? Let's take another listen to how I describe it on CNN with Wolf Blitzer, because this became really our first hint that this person might have a beef, not so much personal with Brian Thompson, but with what he represents.
Okay.
The criminologist Casey Jordan is with us as well. Casey, how could the words depose and delay found written on the ammunition used in the shooting actually wind up helping police identify the suspect?
Well, there's 4 potential words, depending on the source that we're listening to, that were written on these bullet casings. And you're right, the fact that he may have been intentionally expelling the bullets so that they weren't firing, so that they were found, maybe the live ammunition is the ones that had these words. The 4 words that are reported by different sources to be on those bullet casings are delay, deny, depose, and defend. And this is kind of a mantra in the insurance industry for how you get away and keep a profit by simply denying claims. It really does suggest that this shooter is a person who is a disgruntled either employee, but far more likely citizen customer. In other words, somebody who had United Healthcare insurance and felt that their claim was unjustly denied or delayed, or even took them to court and found that they were deposed and that the insurance company defended their denial. Or if not this shooter particularly, someone very close to him. A family member may have suffered or even died. And in his mind, this directly due to the actions of an insurance company. It could be United Healthcare is just a token, a a symbol of the entire insurance industry, or it could be very targeted specifically to United Healthcare. But I think we're going to find, and I do believe they're very close to finding this suspect, that he has a long-standing beef, a long story that is going to be tied to the insurance industry because the message on those casings was very intentional. He is angry at the insurance companies.
And listen, Casey, I'll say it again. We're not here to defend the insurance industry.
Not at all.
That being said, what kind of killer do you think he is? Because we've talked about the mission-oriented and the power control. I mean, we've talked about different killers on the podcast before.
Typically we see mission-oriented killers as serial killers. And listen, he's accused of killing one man. Maybe there was a plan for others, but let's just deal with what we have. He can still be a mission-oriented killer with just one victim.
Okay.
I mean, generally, the person on the mission, and see, I was correct on what I was thinking, except that, as we'll find out, he didn't have a personal beef with the healthcare industry. He's representing every man. It's philosophical. He wants to represent every man who has had a problem with the insurance industry. So a mission-oriented killer, they're obsessed with their own brand of what is right and what is wrong, okay? So righteousness is going to be a hallmark. They're completely convinced that the world needs to be rid of a specific person, or in the case of serial killers, sometimes a person who represents a certain kind of profession or a creed. Now, they believe that they are on a hero's mission to represent everyone who's been wronged by eradicating, or in this case, executing, their target. And if the rest of the world disagrees, well, they're just wrong. They will not stop until the mission is accomplished and the illness that they are trying to eradicate, in this case, it's deny, delay, defend, depose, that has to stop. I think that's the message he was really saying by shooting the CEO of United Healthcare.
You know, it's interesting. You say righteousness. Is there a little bit of grandiosity there too, though? I alone is a little bit what I'm getting from what you're saying there.
Well, the question, yes, but usually they want everyone else to know. I mean, think Joker, Batman's Joker, right? Representing everybody and believing he's justified and becoming a folk hero. I mean, there is righteousness and there is grandiosity. But remember, if you really want to succeed at your mission, no one will ever know who you are. And based on the manifesto that we're going to cover, I think he anticipated he wasn't going to get away with it. So I think he's enjoying grandiosity now, but I don't think it was present when he did it.
And one more thing before we move on and talk a little bit about Luigi Mangione's background. You know, something that's always bugged me, and I wanted to ask you, he approached Brian Thompson from behind as Thompson walked to the north entrance of the Hilton. That was not the main entrance of that hotel. How did Mangione know he was going to be using that entrance?
Oh, I think he had been casing him.
I think so.
I mean, he had been planning this for an incredibly long time. He's a highly intelligent individual. But, you know, let's talk about his background, actually. He's really smart, but he's a few other things as well.
Okay. So Luigi Nicholas Mangione was born to a well-off, proudly Italian-American family in Townsend, Maryland, May 6, 1998. Not only was his family so loving and proud of him, really his whole community was so loving and proud of him. By all accounts, he had a great family. And actually, we have in that ID documentary, they talk about him. And I just find their testimony so interesting because there was just community-wide love for this young man. His whole life.
Let's watch a clip and get it from the source.
Okay, whenever you guys are ready. Okay.
We are on High Street, which is the restaurant row of Little Italy. You leave Little Italy, but Little Italy never leaves you. The Mangione family, what more can I say? I've known the family for at least 50 years. They are like probably one of the most respected, if not the most respected family in the Italian community. What a good-looking family. I don't know about this whole situation here. It doesn't make sense. There's something wrong here.
They've got a big house on the golf course.
Right, speeding.
I'm very close to his mom's side. They're from the same neighborhood that we are. Just he looked like a Mangione, and bright and cheerful and smiley, and you know who he was right away. Shook my head. It can't be happening.
They were generous with their money. They've given a lot to churches. More than one hospital, GBMC, they would just do it without expecting anything back. They are the epitome of the American dream.
Oh, so yes, he grew up in the lap of luxury, if you will, but the family is incredibly respected. He did attend the Gilman School, which is a very elite all-boys secondary school in Baltimore. And he was very athletic, not just incredibly smart, but athletic. Sports like soccer and track. He did cross country, he did wrestling. And also as a teenager, while he was at the Gilman School, he developed an interest in video games and video game development. And he actually taught himself how to code. So that just gives you an indication of how natively intelligent he is. And he graduated as valedictorian of the Gilman School in 2016. And in his speech as valedictorian at graduation, he talked about, and this is a clue, the impact of artificial intelligence and technology on society. So even as an 18-year-old high schooler, he was concerned about how technology was affecting society.
Well, and that's early to be tuned into that, actually. We haven't really seen that discussion in the public discourse until the past few years, widespread. But he was tuned into that before everybody else had really caught on. You know, we've talked about how smart he is, and I will say he's like the real deal smart. I always think of, I know I go back to this, but you know, Ted Bundy was
fake.
He was fake. He was a fake in every way. He wasn't actually smart. He failed many of his classes. It took him very long. He kept getting rejected from law school. He was very performative. He gave a performance of intelligence, but I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but he couldn't pronounce big words, right? So Ted Bundy was fake smart. Luigi Mangione, he's the real deal. He's real smart. He is valedictorian of his high school. He goes off to Penn. That's no joke, getting into Penn, and does well at Penn. And, you know, then goes on into an industry that's really challenging. So
yeah, I believe he did his bachelor's and master's in a 5-year program and was a double major, including computer science. And that's no joke, okay, says this social scientist. So he is a really smart guy. And, you know, he I'm going to argue they weren't just upper middle class. They were incredibly wealthy. You should know that. A lot of people go, oh, he came from a very, you know, moneyed family. This family owned 2 country clubs restaurants, and they were generous, without a doubt. But I need to be very clear, this is not a guy who would have ever lacked for all of the privilege and advantages of he could go anywhere he wanted to school. He could have all the material and creature comforts that he wanted. And something very important, and we'll talk about this later, he would never have lacked for health care or insurance, or if he didn't have insurance, for the ability to pay for his health care. So again, his beef with the insurance industry is not personal. He's representing every man who he thinks suffers at the hands of the insurance.
It's philosophical and ideological. Yeah, he has never been uninsured or underinsured at that. I think what people get hung up on, you're right, you know, just in terms of income and assets, they are a very wealthy family. They're not trust fund rich. They're not generational wealth rich. They are working people. Yeah, they're working people. They've earned that. And I think he did. I think that's important, though, because he's been tuned into what it means to be just that person that wakes up every day, goes to work, puts in a hard day's work, goes home. He's tuned into that in the way that sometimes the very, very wealthy aren't, especially the children of the very, very wealthy. So when he has this sense of camaraderie to the everyman, it's because he's coming from a family where at least he had access.
They had worked their way up.
And they had worked their way up. So that's interesting. But yeah, of course, he's never been uninsured or underinsured. He's never faced those very bleak moments and decisions himself personally.
But what happened to him after he got out of Penn?
All right. So he begins working as a data engineer. He leaves, however, he leaves his job at the end of February 2023. With his former classmate, sharing that Data engineering, according to Luigi, paid super well, but was mind-numbingly boring. I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know firsthand, but I could just agree philosophically that I could never do work like that.
He mind-numbingly boring. So he moves to Hawaii to join a co-living space. And it's when he's in Hawaii, he gets super involved with yoga and the wellness scene and like intentional living. The only thing that I'll note about that only for what he does next in backpacking through Asia. To me, as a sociologist, I can't help it. I see just the little bit of the first steps of pulling back or away from social norms, just a little bit. The wellness movement's a little bit countercultural, not necessarily your standardized Western medicine, so on and so forth. I just see that move to Hawaii as one step. He leaves his 9-to-5, one step away from social norms.
Listen, let's agree. He worked so hard for so long in school. And again, he didn't just lay around. He was like, okay, I'm going to learn coding. Okay, I'm going to get my master's in 5 years. He was a hard worker. And I see this in some of my own students, especially the really high overachievers. All of a sudden, they just crack. They just can't do it anymore. They need a gap year, and they need to figure out what it is that they really want to do in life instead of just what they've been told to achieve. They want to figure out who they are. And overachievement can result in not only taking time off, but becoming a seeker. And that, of course, is when he goes to Hawaii. Let's watch a little bit more of who is Luigi Mangione to hear from his friends in Hawaii.
I met Luigi, it was latter part of 2022.
And Mark?
My name's Dorian Wright, and I am a yoga instructor and a studio owner. He's just like a normal, happy-go-lucky kind of 26-year-old guy. I don't know what would motivate someone like that, to do something like that.
So I created a co-living space in Honolulu during COVID, and he applied to be a member. He was excited to move to Hawaii. He wanted to focus on his health, and he was looking to make new friends. It's incomprehensible that the person I knew and was friends with could assassinate somebody.
When I looked at Luigi, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. He was quite tall and very fit. Every time he walked in, all the women would look at him. So, he was a head turner for the women. And even one of our teachers matched with him on Tinder.
Don't go anywhere. Quick word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. True crime reminds us of something important. Real people's lives can change in an instant. An accident, an act of negligence, a decision that never should have happened. For more than 65 years, Ventura Law has represented people whose lives were altered by negligence and who needed someone in their corner when everything felt uncertain. After a serious injury, everything can feel overwhelming. You're trying to heal, protect your family, and figure out what comes next, all at the same time. Ventura Law helps the injured take back control, restore peace, and move forward. This isn't a big box law firm. When you call Ventura Law, you speak with real people who listen, guide you, and fight for you so that you can focus on healing. They represent victims of serious accidents, dangerous or defective products, and sexual abuse, including abuse during rideshare trips, cases where accountability and justice truly matter. Built on trust, teamwork, and compassion, Ventura Law has earned the confidence of the communities they serve for over 65 years, while giving back through charities, scholarships, and local programs. If you or someone you love has been injured and doesn't know where to turn, Ventura Law is here to help you recover and rebuild. Visit venturalaw.com or call 203-800-8000. Ventura Law, because how you're treated matters. Okay, so
the Tinder pics seen around the world.
Yeah. Well, eventually he is done with Hawaii and decides to continue his pilgrimage to Asia. And I'm going to have to admit that I've done this. And by the way, I highly recommend it. I think every kid, especially after they get out of college, should take some time before they commit themselves to the rat race and go find themselves with a backpack and stay in hostels and meet other people. I actually commend him for this pilgrimage to Hawaii.
If you have the resources, though.
But I'm going to tell you, you can go to Southeast Asia very cheaply. Okay,
It's expensive. Oh, I only know because I've priced this out, Casey.
Listen, I know, but I actually never got my Southeast Asia pilgrimage until about 10 years ago. And I'm going to tell you from firsthand knowledge, I spent about 6 months there, and trust me, I did this on the cheap. I was the teenager who never got to Southeast Asia. I stayed in the youth hostels. I ate pad thai for $1.50 off a paper plate on a curb. And I'm going to tell you, it was indeed life-changing. You do get centered, or at least you have the potential to. I came back a different person. I was more meditative. I was more spiritually grounded. I was more in touch with humankind. And I think that perhaps that Luigi had the same sort of epiphany when he came back from Southeast Asia. But remember, what his friends in Hawaii said was that he was very focused on his health. And I think that could include his mental health, not just his physical health.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And speaking of his health, by and large, he grew up a healthy, athletic guy, played tons of sports in high school, like you said. The aforementioned Tinder profile pic that is all over the internet, clearly depicts a guy that is regularly going to the gym and athletic. Yeah. He does mention, I'm just thinking in terms of his health, on Reddit at one point, and actually his presence on Reddit is really telling in general about his state of mind throughout the whole time leading up. So on Reddit, he talks about having Lyme disease as a young man and it causing a certain amount of brain fog as a teenager. And I wanted to ask, just what do you think about that brain fog? Because I can understand, it can be maddening. If you've ever had Lyme disease, that's real.
It is.
The brain fog is real.
And I've been very fortunate. I don't believe I've ever had Lyme disease, but I've certainly been tested for it. And I certainly know people very close to me who have long-term health issues from Lyme they had 20 years ago. And brain fog is part of that. But brain fog, it's such a kind of nebulous term. What could that be? Women have it from hormones, and anybody who is under stress can have it. Anyone who is in fifth gear has their, amp turned up to 11, meaning in their personal life and in their quest to be perfect and to succeed and in their work life, is going to have brain fog because your CPU is full, if you will. So maybe it's Lyme, maybe it was literally 25 years of being in overdrive that he suddenly, was disconnecting and his brain wasn't working the way he wanted it to. So he just decided to pull the emergency brake, go to Hawaii, go to Asia, finds out he has Lyme, but the brain fog seems to continue to bother him. So that could be an organic medical issue with him. But, he also served on a lot of multimedia, social media platforms, especially Reddit. He suffered from a spinal condition that I won't even try to pronounce. And he says, and I want you to highlight that, he says, because all of this comes from social media, and we can write anything we want on social media. It does not have to be true. But he says he developed this spinal condition in childhood and that it significantly worsened after a surfing accident in Hawaii in 2023. Yep. Now, he reports, circle that he had surgery on his back. And he posts images of an X-ray. We've all seen the spinal X-ray with all with the hardware in it. And he claims it's his back. But to this day, and I'm sorry, this is the lawyer in me. To this day, I've never heard anyone verify that he has had surgery. We haven't heard it from his family. We've had no doctors. And that's his medical history, so we're not entitled to it. But there are no records. I don't know anyone who has ever said they've seen a scar on his back from massive spinal surgery. Not even his mother has, corroborated his assertion. And even his friends in Hawaii couched it. We just saw it in the clip. He put an X-ray, a back X-ray. They don't say it was his. I think they even doubt that it was his back X-ray. So I'm not saying he's lying, but as an attorney who wants everything backed up with hard evidence, I need to remind our viewers and listeners, we have no proof that he ever had back surgery, okay? Or that X-ray is his. It would make sense, but again, it could just all be something he downloaded or found online and created a narrative and a story, again, so that he could find a camaraderie with other people who were on Reddit who had suffered injuries, back injuries. Mm-hmm. And through those people, through talking to them on social media about all of their maladies and their back injuries, he starts hearing stories about how they are in chronic pain because they can't get the services or the surgery or the medications they need with insurance. And I think that's where this may have all started.
That's key, because on Reddit, he talks about how once he had the surgery, it was life-changing, but that he had to advocate and push and push and push for it. And it was this sort of, he was serving as this example to other folks on Reddit of like, listen, I did it, you should do it, and so on and so forth. So let's say, though, let's just assume, for argument's sake, he had the back surgery. And now he's on this mission to rid the world symbolically of the corrupt health insurance system. Is he expressing a personal vendetta based on experience with United Healthcare or the insurance industry in general? What do you think?
I think he could be looking for purpose in his life and find it in representing all of the people who are experiencing pain and suffering, which he believes is directly due to problems they're having getting insurance coverage for their health care. And he believes that no one should be in pain. And he does talk about this back surgery causing him, he's unable to surf. And one of the most interesting things, he says he was unable to have intimate relations after that. And yet I don't know that we've had a lot of women coming out of the woodwork to say that they have had intimate relationships with him. So there's something perhaps, the narrative just could be fantastical. Let's just put it that way. Maybe it's real, but maybe he has found purpose in representing the underdogs out there who don't have a voice, who don't have resources like he does. And he feels for their pain and suffering. He says he has actually cured it through his meditation and holistic lifestyle, that he's no longer feeling pain several weeks after the surgery, but he still feels for those who are living in pain and suffering. So I need to be very clear about one thing here, though. And this is the rub with him being a mission-oriented killer, if that is indeed the theory that fits here. There is a disconnect between Luigi's alleged surgery, and his anger at the healthcare industry. And again, no indication to ever indicate he was ever uninsured or underinsured. I think if he was denied, his parents would just write a check. But according to all the sources, he had regular and reliable access to healthcare throughout his life. And, they're not just comfortable. They could pay millions if they got a bill for millions. So who is he representing in the beef against the insurance industry? The only prospective connection between his alleged surgery is that he was rabbit holing, if you will, online, on social media, feeling genuine emotion and concern about these people, feeling like he could relate to them in some way, and feeling maybe guilty about his privilege that he will not be in their situation. And wanting to kind of be a Robin Hood, that he's going to stand up for the poor. And even if and perhaps that guilt is born of growing up so wealthy.
I'm glad that so you're saying, this idea that it's almost a fantasy to represent these people, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I know at one point before we started the podcast, we talked about how my lens was, it was a little interesting to me because he's not a widowed father whose wife wasn't able to access the mammograms or ultrasound she needed, and as a result, the cancer was discovered too late and she dies. It's not one of those cases of a very poor family and now he's raising a child by himself and really that's not what's happening here.
Not at all. But I listen, he's unemployed, let's just say. He's right now kind of feeling like a spoiled rich kid, surfing in Hawaii, going backpacking in Southeast Asia. I don't think his credit card ever runs out. And I'm not mocking him, but I think he has a certain amount of guilt about that. Like, what is all this for? What is all my education for? What is all, And he he needs purpose in his life because he does not have a job. And the purpose, I think, that evolves in his head is representing people who don't have money, don't have good insurance, or their insurance is turning them down. And he feels justified in fighting on their behalf, perhaps because of the stories that they're telling on Reddit and other social media.
But it does seem he's getting more and more in his head.
Yeah.
Right. So he comes back from Asia, and just that we see him retreating and isolating even more. So gets back in the summer of 2024 and really is isolated with his own thoughts.
Yeah. And, he's had his pilgrimage. He may have had some epiphanies. He may have had some spiritual and holistic balance and feels like, what is my purpose in life? I don't want to go back to coding and to data analytics. I mean, that's the enemy. That's evil. And he starts to isolate himself, and he gets very contemplative, and he starts watching documentaries. He saw Michael Moore's Sicko. He starts reading a lot of books, and he's an avid reader. And he's a seeker. So he sees Sicko, which is an indictment, a really excellent documentary about the healthcare industry. And let's take a quick look at the months that were leading up to the shooting of Brian Thompson to try to suss out a motive.
Okay. So we've already talked about the shell casings at the crime scene, suggesting this mission-oriented killing, targeting the healthcare industry. What do you make of this review on Goodreads, though, of the Ted Kaczynski? So that's the Unabomber manifesto. So, and I've got to say again, how 2024 of him to be on Goodreads, giving his review. He was quite fond of it, wasn't he?
Yes, and
4 out of 5 stars, I think.
Yeah, 4 out of 5 stars for a serial killer's manifesto. I mean, this is, I think, when we see the first hint that he's not just rabbit holing, but that he's changing his thought process. And, I'm very familiar with Ted Kaczynski because I've been in this game for a very long time. You may recall that he was the Unabomber. He had a beef with universities and the airline industry because, get this, and this man had a PhD in mathematics, I believe, from Harvard.
Yeah, went to Harvard, yep.
Yes. So he liked, I think, doing mathematics on an old slate board with chalk. No, seriously. And felt like it was cheating to use calculators, and that the computer industry particularly was fundamentally evil. In a nutshell, he was a Luddite. He was anti-industry, anti-technology. Don't forget, he was found in a cabin in Montana without running water or electricity. That is how much he curled into himself and retreated and isolated. But in his head, a fine line between genius and insanity, perhaps, he was sending bombs to university professors. One at Yale got his thumb blown off. Pipe bombs in airplanes, in airline industry, in universities, and he killed and maimed people. So, but he was like, this is whatever I have to do to stop technology. Now, Luigi reads the manifesto and gives it a high rating on Goodreads. And as far as we know, this is the only book review he ever left on Goodreads. He says, he quoted something from the manifesto that I'm going to quote here. And again, these are the words of Ted Kaczynski that Luigi Mangione admires. Kaczynski wrote, "The idea that violence never solved anything," which is something I would say as a criminologist.
Absolutely.
Kaczynski put that in quote, "Violence never solved anything." According to Kaczynski, this statement is uttered only by cowards and predators. And he said, when all other forms of communication fail, violence is necessary to survive. Now,
so telling.
Luigi read this in the manifesto and put it in his Goodreads book review. So, okay, let's get clear. Those words, that violence is necessary to survive when all else fails, were written by a madman and a serial killer. Let's be very clear about that. So I don't think anybody thinks that Ted Kaczynski was a folk hero for, putting bombs on planes and sending them to professors in the mail. But you've got to understand that man withdrew from life completely. And the only way we found him, actually, is that they had no clue. There was such a manhunt for him for years. They published sections of that manifesto in, I believe, the Washington Post or the New York Times. And sure enough, his brother and sister-in-law read that. And his sister-in-law said to her husband, Ted's brother, "Oh, that sounds just like your brother." And it was they who contacted authorities, and the only reason that we were able to catch Ted Kaczynski. So I think that Luigi is absorbing Kaczynski's philosophy. That's not good. When your philosophy becomes that of the Unabomber, I mean, what you're doing, it's just a retooling of the arch nemesis, where the Unabomber was anti-technology and took it out on universities and universities that were teaching computer science, right? And the airline industry, because he thought it was completely unnatural that planes can defy gravity and go through the air. That just seems unnatural. It's the same thought process. It's just substitute universities and airlines for the healthcare insurance industry. The thought process is the same. It's just the source of the world gone awry is different. Luigi is focusing in his anti-tech mind on the technology that these huge insurance industries are using to deny, depose, defend, and delay. And he just picked a different enemy, but his thought process was the same.
And again, though, it represents retreating from and even rejecting norms, right? This, I'm going to go rogue and handle it myself. I gather that neither one of these guys were your vote matters people.
Exactly.
Or elect legislators who will then regulate a system and make it more fair. They don't have the time for that.
Right.
There's no time for that. It doesn't work anyway. You got to take matters into your own hands, and violence is the way to do it. And if you're not willing to do it, you're a coward. It's just so challenging.
And all of this is not just our conjecture. This is based on what was found in the spiral notebook in that backpack that they don't want entered at trial.
Exactly, because doesn't Luigi have his own manifesto?
I think manifesto is a really, generous word for it.
Okay.
It was a page of handwriting on a spiral notebook, okay? I just think manifesto. It was, let's just say it was his note to the feds, because I think he was really spiraling downwards, becoming a little unhinged, being a wanted man, saw the coverage on the news and knew that the jig would be up soon. So he wanted to actually, in case, I think he's very intelligent. He knew he might not survive a standoff with police if it came to that. So he wanted to leave and memorialize his thoughts just in case that happened. That's my take on it. So Colleen, I know that Newsweek was the first to publish this manifesto, and we don't want to get any words wrong, and we need to make sure that our listeners understand that you are quoting. So please read it word for word exactly.
I'm quoting it word for word from my university-issued laptop, yes. In the spiral notebook, he says, "To the feds, I'll keep this short, because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, computer-aided design, and a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down because I worked in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife or traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the U.S. has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly 42nd in life expectancy. United is the largest company in the U.S. by market capital, behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. It has grown and grown, but has our life expectancy? No. The reality is these Decipherable have simply gotten too powerful. I assume he means companies, have simply gotten too powerful. And they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Obviously, the problem is more complex, but I do not have space, and frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. But many have illuminated the corruption and agreed, e.g. Rosenthal and more, decades ago, and the problems simply remain. It's not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty."
Colleen, I know all of this, but he was never a client of United Healthcare, correct?
Absolutely. He was never a client, but also what I get from that manifesto, two things. The I alone. There's the I alone can be the one to fix it. I'm the only one that's faced this.
There's that grandiosity.
The grandiosity. But also, I find it so interesting at the beginning, he really wants you to know he's a good guy. I'm a good guy, and I alone, right? The way he's so polite, essentially, and whatnot. What do you make of the manifesto in general?
Well, first of all, he's very articulate. And even I appreciate his kind of APA citing his sources. Oh, don't forget Moore and Rosenthal. No, and I'm not being facetious. His intelligence and his education really come through. And it's not the rantings of a madman like you would see in the Ted Kaczynski manifesto. It is impassioned, but it's also incredibly egomaniacal with the I alone. He has actually convinced himself that nothing will change unless he, Luigi Mangione, stands up and represents the poor people, the underprivileged, the people who don't have what he has. And I don't know if that's just part of the guilt for growing up in a privileged and wealthy family, but in his mind, I think he really believes he's doing a good thing. There's no doubt about that. But, public reaction's going to be swift.
So I was going to say, what's the public reaction to this then?
Well, you know what? Let's do one more clip from ID's Who is Luigi Mangione? We're going to hear what happened to Dan Abrams, who I've known for years and who started Law and Crime Network, on what happened when he gave his opinion on Luigi Mangione.
It was immediately clear to me why someone might have wanted to kill this guy. The December 4th Legal Committee wanted to give a voice to all the people and the anger that they felt. One doctor who donated says, quote, "I applaud Luigi for his courage, heart, and passion." A nurse who donated $100 calls Luigi a soldier of the people. "If anyone deserves a badge of honor, it is you."
He became the representative for the healthcare industry that deserved to die. Luigi Mangione was being treated as some sort of hero.
From what I know now, I'd say yes, he is. We'll see what the end outcome is.
You really think
Absolutely.
Accused of murder and he's a hero?
Absolutely.
I host a call-in radio show, and when I talked about the fact that it is abhorrent that people are trying to defend him, almost every caller called in to yell at me.
Well, what I got is, I guess you guys just missed the real news and the fact that there's tens of thousands of people that die in every year because of this damn greed.
So that
it's
justifies...
It's going to happen even more. Right. And I guarantee you won't find unanimous jury to convict this guy. Why? Because he does deserve it.
I think it is shameful to somehow blame Brian Thompson for his own murder. And that is what a lot of people are doing.
You know, the sad thing is that Dan Abrams had his life threatened simply for calling it like he sees it on his radio show. Nobody thinks. And by the way, I know people personally who totally think Luigi should be found not guilty because they have suffered so much at the hands of the healthcare industry. And I try to be balanced. I wanted to wear my T-shirt tonight that says Switzerland on it so everyone knows I'm neutral and don't come after me. But I am incredibly fortunate to have really good healthcare insurance, so I cannot pretend to know some of the suffering. I hear that from my friends who struggle with their insurers. I've heard the horror stories. I do know about it, and I absolutely believe it was real. I mean, we can detest the healthcare industry without blaming and killing one man for all of its failures. That's my perspective. But let's agree that the spotlight that this murder has shed on the healthcare industry, healthcare insurance industry, that needed to happen. Absolutely. I don't think it needed to happen by murder. There are other ways. You can have nonviolent protests, and gosh, you can file lawsuits, and I know that is more deny, delay, depose, and all that. But
it takes money.
It takes money, and it takes time, and I understand. But the socially acceptable things to do are to protest, fight the fight, raise awareness, use social media, which is how he, I think, got sucked into this conversation, and use the courts. Clearly, this has not worked fast enough or efficiently enough for people like Luigi, and he felt like he needed to make a statement.
Real quickly, Casey, we talk so much about victims on this podcast. Certainly not yet on this podcast have we come across an instance where people get so incredibly angry at the victim.
Yeah.
Have you come across that before, where enormous anger at the victim?
Usually when they are a horrible, violent killer that people think deserve to die. But this is a symbolic, I mean, they call Brian Thompson a killer, but he's just the CEO of a company, you know, and the stretch on that, I've never seen it, no.
Okay.
But, you know, let's...
NPR actually pulls that together for us a little bit, the anger towards Thompson. So I'll just read you quickly what NPR has to say. The indifference of people to Thompson's murder was entirely because of the indifference of these healthcare companies, and if not directly Thompson, Obviously, he was not directly responsible for every denied claim, but he presided over it. And The Guardian really went right at it more directly, saying Thompson was the face of an unfair system that screwed millions of people over.
And millions of people agree with that. According to The New Yorker, and I quote, as CEO Thompson increased United Healthcare's profits by $5 billion with a B dollars in just 2 years while at the helm, United Healthcare more than doubled its denial rate for pre-authorization requests and post-acute care. I mean, one of Thompson's signature innovations was to use a predictive algorithm to kick ailing and disabled Medicare patients out of nursing homes and rehabilitative programs. That's quite an indictment from a source that I will absolutely respect. I mean, the numbers, the statistics don't lie.
And it is profit over people.
It is. So I think the most disturbing thing for me, since I'm a major fan of Saturday Night Live, okay, is that when Colin Jost, in a Weekend Update just after this shooting happened, he began a dark humor joke about Luigi's female fan base. And when he just said the name Luigi Mangione at the start of his joke, the crowd went wild and erupted in cheers at just hearing his name. Let's take a quick listen.
Luigi Mangione dropped... Yeah, definitely woo. You're wooing for justice, right? Luigi Mangione dropped his extradition fight and was flown from Pennsylvania to New York to face multiple charges. In related news, Bumble exploded.
I mean, I remember them describing his ankles in his little Gucci loafers, in his ankle shackles in court as pornographic. I mean, this is not funny.
But it's not just because he's handsome, right? There's this idea that because of who he targeted and at least his alleged motivation for doing so, that what he did was honorable, right? So it's not just he's handsome, but what he did was honorable. And he's risen to this folk hero status. Again, The New Yorker, I love this metaphor that they use, likening him to the outlaw hero. So The New Yorker again says, the American outlaw hero is a man of the people. He's closely identified with the common people and as such is generally seen to stand in opposition to certain established oppressive economic, civil, and legal systems peculiar to the American historical experience. The outlaw hero's persona is that of a good man gone bad, not unlike oncology patient Walter White of Breaking Bad, who started cooking meth because his insurance didn't cover his cancer treatments. Casey, is he the outlaw hero?
Listen, I like a good revolution, but this one is too twisted for me. I would not call him a hero. I would never use that in the same sentence. The crowd went wild, and he goes to court and he proclaims not guilty. I mean, I think that there was some kind of controversy in the holding cell because somebody found that he had a pair of panties slipped into his pocket. I mean, you can't be validating somebody with hero worship. He had that perp walk where the women were, I say they were throwing him kisses, but apparently they were flinging their panties at him too. So, let's talk about that, because apart from the fact that when he went to court, I've got to tell you, let's just talk about his court appearance, because that's when the girls were waiting outside, screaming, Luigi, Luigi. And it's like, boy, do not fan the flames. Apart from that perp walk, he went in, he entered a plea. I was really noticing his behavior. And one of the things that really stood out for me was that he wore this beautiful cashmere burgundy sweater, and his attorney wore a sweater that matched. And I was like, please. And by the way, I totally respect her. She is the best attorney money could buy and a former prosecutor. But I mean, I just was like, whoa, has she gotten sucked into this because twinning is winning? I mean, what message is she sending by dressing like Luigi? Because he couldn't have dressed like her, but she could have delivered that sweater to him for his court date. And then decided in solidarity to wear the same thing. I might be overreaching here, but I'm just like, whoa, there's a lot of signals going on out there that just send the subliminal message that what he did is okay, and we love Luigi, and I don't think that's okay.
Well, and we love Luigi also. I don't think the media is helping here. Now, in another one of the recent court appearances, there were some stills that released of him just absolutely looking like a GQ model. You know, like sort of candid shots of an open smile. And I have a teeny bit of familiarity with photography, and I promise you, those photographers had maybe 700 stills. And in a few hundred of them, he looked awful. I promise you.
Oh, yeah.
We all take a bad photo. But they chose intentionally the ones where he's glowing and looking so handsome. This isn't accidental.
No, it's like clickbait, thirst trap, photo editing. Fanning the flames. Why? But because people will click on it and they will go to that story and they will buy that magazine when they're checking out at the local grocery store. I mean, beauty sells, and in the right light, he presents beautifully. So let's maybe just see, one more clip from Who is Luigi Mangione that features that court appearance.
Yeah.
He leans into the microphone to say the words clearly.
Not guilty.
Not guilty, with a level of confidence. He's unperturbed by the whole process. Like, this is beneath me. I'm sorry, yes, I have to show up and I have to go through all of this. But time will tell. You will see this was necessary.
I'm very concerned about my client's right to a fair trial in this case. He's being prejudiced by some statements that are being made by government officials. He's a young man, and he is being treated like a human ping pong ball, like some sort of political fodder, like some sort of spectacle. He was on display for everyone to see in the biggest staged perp walk I've ever seen in my career. It was absolutely unnecessary. This has to stop, and we're going to fight these charges, whether it's in the state or federal, to the fullest extent. Thank you, Your Honor.
It sure seems to me his defense is not going to be, I didn't do it. He could try insanity, but I don't think he's going to. I think he would refuse. That would undermine his entire cause.
But as a practical matter, the defense is likely going to focus all on jury selection, trying to find people who will sympathize or at least understand why Luigi Mangione allegedly did what he did.
Oh, and I'm going to tell you that as a defense attorney who has, in fact, represented people on murder charges at trial, she's got her work cut out for her. And I completely agree with Dan Abrams. I'm going to end up riffing on this a lot because I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I hope I don't get into trouble. This appearance in court when he entered not guilty, I mean, I think it was as much, she goes on about how the perp walk was unnecessary. Trust me, she is putting him on a stage in a very carefully rehearsed way as well. And, I do want to confirm, he has the most competent attorney money can buy. But, as soon as they left that courtroom after he said those two words, not guilty, with all that confidence, by the way, I take issue with her untucked shirt in court. Sorry. Okay.
No, I had thought the same thing. I just that you said it, I was like,
I would never wear that to court.
No.
All right,
we don't judge women on their clothing. And okay.
This is the only snarky thing you're going to hear from me today, I hope. But I think she was trying to look casual around Luigi, right? And not stuffy. So listen, as soon as he entered his plea, she came out of that courtroom, and then she walked right out of the courthouse, and on the steps, on the sidewalk, on the street, she holds a presser with all of the cameras. Oh, over here, please look at me. And she gives maybe a 10-minute speech. And here's what I loved the most about it. Who is Luigi Mangione? The documentary had just come out because power to Rhonda and Brian. They turned that thing out immediately. They put that out, and she watched it on HBO and was horrified to know that we had things in the documentary that she didn't have.
Is that fair for her to be furious about that?
Excuse me. We found that stuff. The police didn't find that stuff. We investigative journalists found that stuff. All of his writings online. So that's not subject to discovery, okay? But it means she hasn't done her homework yet. She was infuriated that there was all of this stuff that, call it evidence, that could be damaging to him when she goes to trial. And she decided to literally cite the HBO documentary, Who is Luigi Mangione? I mean, I sat up and was like, oh my God. Because, yes, she was very offended by certain things that we said in there and wanted to call us out. Let's just watch the end of that news clip, the last part, where she references the documentary that we have been showing you clips of throughout this episode of Criminal Appeal.
And which brings me to the most important point that we made today, which is Luigi's right to a fair trial is being infringed upon because he is being publicly treated as guilty and as having the presumption of guilt as opposed to the presumption of innocence, which is what he is entitled to. And although of course, I understand the NYPD's need for a press conference before an arrest or after an arrest, which they did here. I didn't like it, but they did it, and I understood it. What I did not understand was how shocking it was that this week on HBO, in a documentary, I see the chief of detectives and the New York City mayor, full hair and makeup done, sitting down and giving an interview for television and talking about the evidence in Luigi's case, talking about police paperwork that we don't have, talking about forensics that we have not yet received. I guess we have now today, but I didn't when I was sitting there learning about the case, hearing an actor play Luigi reading from a journal that they say is Luigi's, and we have yet to receive it from the prosecution. And so it's outrageous that they have time to go and prejudice Mr. Mangione's ability to receive a fair trial and go out and make these statements, but not give this to us. And so we are concerned because if the chief of detectives is telling everybody about all this evidence, and what if it ultimately gets suppressed because it was an illegal search and seizure in Altoona, Pennsylvania, how is he going to get a fair trial?
And I'm going to tell you, I would have given that exact same speech if I were in her shoes.
Okay.
That is good lawyering, okay? And sorry, she better watch My Cousin Vinny and find out about something called Discovery. I'm just being a little, again, second snarky. But she is getting that stuff, right? It's just she's going through proper lawyerly channels. And, documentarians, we get the sources whenever we can, wherever we can. And I am completely guilty of full hair and makeup, especially today. So I will plead guilty to that. All right, but let me bring her, tongue-in-cheek aside. She raises some very good issues. Can the man get a fair trial?
Sure.
And she's probably going to argue for a change of venue. It is pointless if that happens. Wherever we go, Colleen, what's going to happen? He's going to have a huge fan base. And it doesn't matter.
And my question to that is, could a jury... Is there the possibility, because it's a massive fan base, is there a possibility a jury could be prejudiced in his favor? Could he end up with a stealth juror who's one of the free Luigi and will be the stick in the mud that declares a mistrial? I mean, could this work in his favor?
Colleen, not only do I think that's possible, I think it's probable.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Listen, you are so right. It's a very big danger of what we call the stealth juror. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this concept, go read Runaway Juror, Runaway Jury. There are people out there, and my expertise in doing criminal trials is jury selection, which we call voir dire. And man, it is really a bit of a crapshoot. You end up getting the jury that you maybe they're going to be good, maybe they're not. Just the way the strikes work, it's a very complex strategy. But I can tell you that I have absolutely sensed that, and that's why they have a criminologist do the voir dire, sense that I have stealth jurors trying to get on a murder trial, and they have already made up their minds, even before they have been selected for the trial, how they're going to vote. And they don't care what the rule of law says. They don't care what the evidence says. That's why we call them stealth jurors. They have their own mission, which is that, fill in the blank, I am going to convict this person because anybody who has been charged has got to be guilty and probably knows somebody who's been harmed by a criminal and wants that loss to be substituted by convicting the person in front of them. They may not even be aware of it to that extent, but they go in there going, I know I will vote guilty. They don't say that during voir dire. It's in their head. They want to get on the jury so that they can convict somebody as payback for something that may have happened to them.
When you're selecting a jury, do you have the access to, for example, look at their social media presence?
No. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me talk in a hypothetical. All you get is their questionnaire, a one-pager that says where they live, have they ever been arrested? They fill all that stuff out. And some people write down the bare minimum, and some people write a whole book.
Mm-hmm.
If they write a whole book, they seem to want to get on the jury. But can I tell you, in this age of technology, with jury consultants who work on the sidelines during this, who are not lawyers and they're not doing voir dire, they're passing notes to the lawyers who are actually interviewing the potential jurors and deciding whether they accept or reject this juror. They're sitting there absolutely looking at the social media, and they have to be lightning fast, but they can. It is not considered, let's just say it's considered objectionable, but I don't believe it's illegal for them to do a quick 30-second search on this person and go, okay, look, looks like his child died, oh my gosh, by a drug overdose 2 or 3 years ago, and my client is charged with drugs. Oh, we don't want this person, right? You shouldn't even know that because it's not on the questionnaire, but believe me, they know more than they should. And they only have the time that juror in the state of Connecticut is on the stand to do that. It's really difficult, and I don't want you to think it happens all the time. But does it happen? I do think it does. Now, listen, I think he wants to go to trial. But if he was smart, maybe he would take a plea bargain.
Do you think he will?
No.
Because Kroberger did.
I know, and we didn't think he would. We were like Brian Kroberger wants to be in the limelight, but Brian Kroberger wasn't a mission-oriented killer. All right, he was power control and hedonistic lust, or whatever you want to call it. This guy is on a mission. So, listen, the feds have the death penalty on this one, but New York State does not, and I think it would be a mistake. Forget your philosophy on whether the death penalty is good or bad. It would be a mistake for them to go for it. They need to just give this one a pass and go for life in prison.
Why?
Because it's going to be hard enough with his fan base and the possibility of stealth jurors to get a good so-called clean, ethical jury, and to find one that will actually give this handsome young man that made Bumble explode the death penalty. They're not going to get it, but they will waste gazillions of dollars and maybe another 10 years trying to get it. And I don't think it will happen. So why don't we just take that off the table? Because I think that will only make him more of a folk hero. Oh my God, they're going to actually execute this man. More likely to be found not guilty by people who are conflicted on the jury. Listen, I don't think there's any chance that this was mistaken identity. Okay, the evidence is overwhelming. Do I think his attorney should recommend he take a plea to life in prison and spare the world all of his grandstanding? Yes, but that's the whole point of the trial. He's never going to agree to that. He wants his day in court. I will not think he will ever get on the stand. But a lot of this depends. If she manages to get the evidence in the backpack, the gun, the manifesto, thrown out, suppressed, then you have some photographic images, right? It could be an uphill battle if they lose the evidence because the evidence so far is overwhelming. But the biggest problem is, are we going to be able to get a jury who doesn't watch the news, doesn't know who Luigi is, doesn't have a beef with the healthcare industry? So I'm very, very worried. I don't think a change of venue will matter one bit.
Not at all.
You could move this to the middle of Alaska and it won't make a difference. The bottom line is, I think, and Dan Abrams just addressed this in his observations, that they won't try the insanity plea, but I'm going to tell you, as somebody who has defended murderers based on mental health defenses, it is her best bet. And New York is one of the few states, and I don't want to get geeky CJ 101 on you, but states like Texas use the McNaughton rule, which is almost impossible to be found not guilty based on insanity, because the rule of law is basically like, if you even know that the general public thinks what you did is wrong, you're guilty, you're not insane. But New York uses a blended rule for insanity called the substantial capacity test. And this is something he might be able to use, that at the time he committed this act, okay, and it's alleged, so it's an act, not a crime yet. At the time he committed this, it was him physically pulling the trigger, but he was in such a mental fugue, maybe having brain fog, which is documented, right? Having such a mental health crisis over all of the people suffering at the hands of the United Healthcare insurance industry, that in that moment, it's almost like temporary insanity, he did not have substantial capacity to understand the wrongfulness of his act. And I'm going to tell you, and I am not 1% of the attorney she is, but at the same time, I would think that that is something they would entertain, except that, Colleen, I don't think he would allow it, because he is going to be adamant that he is not mentally ill, he is not insane, that he did this on purpose, and he needed to make a statement to help every man. Final thoughts, Colleen, from you?
Gosh, I don't know. Other than stay tuned, the entire phenomenon has just been so fascinating to me, and it is a case unlike others. Like I've already said, I'm no fan of the healthcare industry. I understand how much anger there is about it, but I also understand that a 50-year-old
man died.
Dad, father died.
And Colleen, if we start accepting the rationale that this man had to die to make a point, that's not a slippery slope. That is the world's fastest, steepest water slide, and we will go down it, and we will just have people shot all the time, for philosophical reasons to make a point instead of peaceful protest, and we can't open the door to that. So, Luigi Mangione came from immense privilege, from this very wealthy family. And, I agree with the assessment that the healthcare industry, insurance industry, has to change. It has to change. And it's going to be, I don't even want to call it a silver lining, but if this is the impetus for those changes to start happening, maybe that is the only positive thing that would come out of that. But then that worries me, because then it might be open season on CEOs of any industry we don't like. So, it does raise some questions that I want to raise as well, that are worth talking about. How could this healthcare insurance industry become so broken that someone, Luigi Mangione, the accused, might take it upon themselves to send a symbolic, socio-political, philosophical message by assassinating the CEO of an insurance company? And he never met this man. This man never did anything to him. He never worked for the company. You know what? It's almost Joker style, for those people who understand, the whole psychology of Joker from the Batman series. I have one more little piece of B-roll about the insurance industry before I wrap this up.
Okay.
I needed a surgery in January, a hysterectomy. And roughly 2 days before the scheduled surgery, I received a denial from United Healthcare. I was informed that the reason for the denial was that the surgery was perceived as not medically necessary. It was infuriating, it was frustrating, and I was frankly at a loss. I didn't see a way forward. My surgeon did fight for me, though. I was able to have it as scheduled, but I did not know until the day before. United wouldn't do what they did if there were consequences for their behavior.
Delay, deny, depose.
And it's not just United Healthcare, it's the entire industry. So, the second question is what's happening in our society that an assassin believes this is the only way to gain attention for this conundrum. And then, after the murder of Brian Thompson, he is lauded for that act under the most twisted claim of defense of a third party. And that's in his note. He's like, I had to do it. I'm defending all of the American people, or people worldwide, by doing this. And I think that's the defense that his lawyer is going to posit. It does not fit our understanding of self-defense and defense of a third party as we know it in the books of criminal law. But, courts can make decisions through legal precedent and judgments which change our interpretation and understanding of what defense of a third party means. And I think that's what they're going to go for here. That he believed he had to do this to defend a third party from death, and that third party is everyone who is insured. But I need to say, for the record, okay, and this is not acceptable under no way, no how is this acceptable. Murder is never acceptable, and assassinations are never acceptable. You know, whether it's a president like JFK or Ronald Reagan, you know, on two different sides of a coin, a civil rights leader like MLK assassinated Medgar Evers, cultural revolutionaries and poets, I mean, Gandhi and John Lennon, a religious leader like Charlie Kirk. Or remember the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. You know, we just don't go around killing people. And Mangione appeared really directionless, I think, at this stage of his life. He was unstable. You know, his friends had noted that for months he was kind of unwinding. And he is armed with resources that we can only dream about, right? So he had access to more money than Brian Thompson, the CEO that he allegedly murdered. And Thompson, in stark contrast, he worked his way up from humble beginnings. He did not have all these advantages. And his life was cut short early on that morning on his way to work by someone who chose destruction over responsibility.
I am also curious on your thoughts on his supporters and the fan club. And just a moment ago, you had said, we can't just go around killing CEOs and having them fear for their lives. I can almost hear in my head his supporters being like, no, we want them scared.
Yeah.
Because they need to know what it feels like to be scared if your hysterectomy or your mastectomy or whatever it is may or may not be covered. We want them scared. Just what do you make of his supporters as a whole?
That's a fair question. And please, if you're supporting Mangione, please don't come after me, because I respect all humans. And that's kind of the answer I'm going to give you. We can support the ideology of Mangione. We can support his mission to provide affordable and accessible health care to everyone. I think that really is the mission, without supporting his murderous act. All right? And to do that would tear apart the foundation of this country and the rule of law. And that's the common thread here. Either the rule of law applies equally to everyone, regardless of their financial background or their profession or their race, or it doesn't exist at all. I mean, we are on a precipice here. We do not murder people. Sorry if I sound a little preachy, but this is, we have to walk away with an eye towards prevention. We don't murder people because they work in a place that we vehemently disapprove of. All right? To do so would result in anarchy and burn civilization to the ground. I truly believe that. So Brian Thompson's murder, the murder of this man, was pure evil, even if the person who pulled the trigger was couching it in philosophical righteousness. And anyone who celebrates it you're celebrating the destruction of moral order, and that's very dangerous. Now, I have my own issues with insurance companies, and I have good insurance. Believe me, I get it, but I can never support killing someone in principle, no matter how much of a beef I have with what they represent. And I hope our listeners kind of look into their own hearts, and I get where the anger is coming from, but remember, we have to do something for the greater good, and murder is never the answer.
No, it's not.
So thank you, Colleen, for joining me on this very controversial but very necessary episode of Criminal Appeal, because I believe that it could be this year, 2026, maybe next year, that we are going to have a trial of Luigi Mangione for murder. And I know everybody's going to be watching, listening, and making up their mind as they go. But as you make up your mind, dig deep into your own consciousness about right and wrong, and remember that crime doesn't know what time it is, but justice doesn't care. At Ventura Law, they've spent more than 65 years standing up for people whose lives were thrown off track through no fault of their own. A serious accident or injury isn't just a legal issue, it's personal. It affects your health, your family, your livelihood, and your future. Ventura Law helps injured people navigate that aftermath and begin the journey back to their lives. This isn't a big box law firm where you're treated like a case number. When you call Ventura Law, you speak with real people who truly care. They listen, they stand with you, and they fight for you, so you can focus on healing and get your life back. They represent victims harmed by negligence, including serious accidents, dangerous or defective products, and sexual abuse cases, including abuse during rideshare trips, when accountability truly matters. built on trust, teamwork, and compassion. Ventura Law has earned that trust for over 65 years while giving back to the communities they serve. If you or someone you love has been injured and doesn't know where to turn, Ventura Law is here to help you recover, rebuild, and move forward. Visit venturalaw.com or call them at 203-800-8000. Ventura Law, because how you're treated matters. Thanks for listening. This has been a Parish House production. Special thanks to the fabulous team at Uptime Productions.